VIII was still a Catholic, wasn't he?
Who?
He was still a Catholic even after he left. He made himself out of the church. He was never a Protestant.
Oh, Henry VIII?
Yeah, he was
absolutely.
Catholic
Yeah.
Died.
He ordered hundreds of masses to be said for his soul after he died, and they were said as well. The king was misled by his, particularly in relation to Anne Boleyn, because he was so stupid. He could have had her as his mistress if he'd really played his cards right, because he had mistresses. The Duke of Northumberland, I think, was his bastard son. He could have had bastard sons by Anne Boleyn, but she was crafty. She played her cards very well and got him to make her queen. So that's how we got the breach with England and Rome. But if he'd been sensible, he'd have not done that. He'd have had his mistresses. He'd have stayed loyal to Rome, and also he would not have had the threat of war, which eventually came. And here's something else: there were two Anglican priests in the 18th century, who did some research on the major English families of that time, the 18th century, who had received the proceeds of the dissolution of the monasteries. These families, it turned out, were dying out in the male line by the 18th century. The 19th century, more Anglican priests looked into this, and almost all of those families had died out in the male line. The conclusion was, it was by a man called Jameson. The conclusion was that these men, their families had touched sacred goods, attached to which were curses. If you touch God's things, you've got a curse upon you. And the curse upon them was they die out in the male line, so that the families die out. The Queen Elizabeth, she had no children, so the Tudor house died out, and that is part of the curse. He touched the things of God. That's a lesson to everyone. Yes, we did. So what happens is, we get to the 17th century, and James II converts to the Catholic. Sorry, when he's the Prince of Wales, James Stuart, Prince of Wales, converts to the Catholic faith. He marries Mary of Modena. They have a child. This worries the Protestants because he's next in line to the throne. Charles II has come to the throne after the death of Cromwell and the removal of his son Oliver. I think it's Oliver. Now, Charles II is a secret Catholic. On his deathbed, Charles reveals that he was baptised a Catholic. He converted to the faith, but he kept his secret during his life. When his brother James becomes king, becomes James II, he is a well-known Catholic, and his son is likely to succeed. The Protestants of England are really scared about this, so they organise a coup d'etat against our lawful king by organising Protestants to bring an army over and overthrow our lawful monarch. They do this, and it's in 1688. They defeat us at the Battle of the Boyne in Ireland, and the Protestants celebrate that like there's no tomorrow. And they're right to, from their point of view. But the fact remains, our lawful king was deposed by traitors. And for that we got in 1694 the Bank of England, where English people were charged money, were taxed to pay the king's interest borrowed from the guys who ran the Bank of England to pay for the king's wars. So had it not been for this overthrow, the English might have been richer. Anyway, you're right to raise these points. They're good points.